All right, folks, it's just a little bit past 6:31. I think we've had most people log on. Other folks will continue to join us through the evening. My name is Eric Hayden. I'm a meteorologist with the Weather Service in Morehead City, North Carolina. This is our online presentation for Winter Skywarn. Hopefully you've been to a class with us before. If you have not, welcome. This is the first of many classes that we offer. It is the last class of this season for the winter season, but starting in late March through the month of May, we'll have spring training, which focuses on things like severe thunderstorms, tornadoes, and high winds. And we'll talk more about that at the end of the class. A couple housekeeping items. Again, if you see me, you can see the presentation. You're in really good shape. Some technical information. All your microphones have been muted, so don't worry about having to worry about background noise. You're good to go with that. At any point, if you have a question, just ask that in the chat box itself. I'll get to the questions at the end unless I see one that's something like a technical issue. Otherwise, we'll address all the questions at the end itself. And depending on how you're viewing this, you can make this bigger. If you're watching on a mobile device, if you swipe left or right, you can do full screen presentation or full screen me. If you're on a PC, you can stretch and you can make the windows bigger. So if you can't see the presentation really well, just stretch it out and make it full screen. You don't need to see me. You can just leave the presentation up. Like I said, if you've got a question, you can ask it. At the end, we'll give you a chance to raise your hand if you want to ask a verbal question. And this is being recorded. We plan to post this to YouTube. So if you know of anybody that missed a class or you just want to see it again, you can certainly do so. In the handout section, you can download this presentation and your certificate. So if you have any online issues, if I go too quick, you want to see another part, certainly you can review it on your own. Just a little bit wider screen to show you some of the technical aspects of the webinar. If you don't see that question box I'm talking about, hit that orange arrow and that will allow you to see it. And there's the raised hand feature at the bottom. You can ask any questions. So at this point, if you've got any questions technical wise, shoot them in the chat. And I'll try to address them. Otherwise, we'll get going. I don't see any, so that's good news. Everybody should be able to hear me. Very, very good. So it's a little bit after 6:30. About the next 15 minutes, we're going to go over who the Weather Service is, why we need spotters. We're going to talk about the winter outlook for the year. If you've ever been to a class before, this is a repeat. Who we are, what we do, why we need spotters. For you new people, this is just to get you involved in the program itself. And the real crux of the class is from about 6:45 to 7:20. That's when we'll go over winter hazards here in eastern North Carolina, ice storms, coastal flooding, of course, snow and nor'easters. We'll also talk about how to report snow and ice to us at the Weather Service. And then at the end, we'll wrap things up and give you a chance to ask any questions that you have. So as I mentioned, if you've been to a class before, we talk about this a lot because we get new folks in the class each time. So some of you are new, some of you, this is a repeat. Our main mission in the Weather Service is the protection of life and property. We issue forecasts, but also warnings, watches, and advisories to accomplish that mission. So you may get it this way on your mobile device. Perhaps you even have a NOAA weather radio at home and you get your warnings that way, or your favorite local broadcaster. So that's our main mission, is that specialized forecast for the protection of life and property. We have a lot of offices in the country. We're going to talk more about our office here shortly. We're in far eastern North Carolina. Each dot from Grand Forks down to Corpus Christi to Caribou to Anchorage, each dot on the map is a local office. They're scattered all across the country to give you accurate forecasts for your local area. And you can see that they cover everywhere, roughly every couple hours across the United States. As far as our local office goes, I mentioned we're in Newport or Morehead City area. That's far eastern North Carolina. We do cover the Outer Banks up toward Greenville, Kinston, and Jacksonville. So roughly the eastern quarter of the state. Raleigh covers the central part of the state. Wilmington on the southeast part, and then Wakefield or the Richmond office covers the northeast part of North Carolina. We do go out into the ocean 20 nautical miles for warnings and also forecasts. So any of this yellow shaded area, if you've been on a boat, you've gone fishing, or even just to the beach, we've got you covered with those forecasts. And the blue area, the Ocean Prediction Center, does the forecast for beyond 20 miles, but we do issue warnings that far out. We are 24/7 operation. Our building itself is up higher. It's reinforced with brick and hurricane shutters, so we're designed to stay when the weather gets bad. This is an example of some of our staff, almost all the staff, during Florence. We took a group picture. This is my office. During Florence, we slept there 3 to 7 days, depending on the first 3 days we couldn't get out of the office because of flooding, and then for some of us we had damage to the homes, so we just stayed put at work. So we are open for that protection of life and property, and again, we're in a reinforced building, so we stay when the weather gets bad. The best way to get information from us is our website. If you just remember weather.gov, you don't need the www, you don't need the HTTP, just weather.gov for government, and then click on the part of the country you're interested in. So for us, if you click on Eastern North Carolina, you'll get the Morehead City page. Really, really nice website. If you enter the city or zip code in this box, or if you click on this map, you'll get a localized forecast, and it'll pull up a map, a Google map, and there's a 3 by 3 mile box that's where the forecast is. So let's say you do New Bern, Greenville, Jacksonville, and if you zoom into the map a little bit, you can pick Piney Green or Pumpkin Center or Wallace or Kinston. You can move it around and get real localized. I live in Morehead City or Newport. I live by the Chick-fil-A, the Walmart, wherever you are. You can zoom in to your local neighborhood to get that detailed forecast. We start off basic, so kind of a text forecast, high and low. Is it going to rain? Is it going to be windy? And some icons just to kind of get you going with the forecast. If you want more details, scroll down. There's an hourly weather forecast. There's a forecast discussion. Really anything you need weather-wise is certainly on our website. Really, really good stuff. Since this is a winter class, if you scroll to the bottom of our website, there's an icon that's a winter icon, and you can get our winter page, or you can just go weather.gov/moreheadcity/winter. I'm throwing a lot of websites at you. Remember, you have your PDF, so you can look at this after the class ends, and I'm going to follow up with an email tomorrow. In that email will be all of these links. So if you have a pen or pencil and you want to write it down, go for it. If I'm going too fast or you want to revisit some of these sites, you're going to get an email. It's going to have your certificate again in case you had any trouble tonight. Certainly these emails that I'm talking about, or the websites I'm talking about, and then some spotter information, which we'll go over at the end. Back to the winter site. This is where we post our snowfall forecast. We'll do probability, worst case scenario, also what we expect, so some snow probability maps on that website as well. This is what the website looks like. I mentioned at the bottom, below the forecast are icons. Marine forecast, here's our Skywarn page, a radar, a lot of good stuff. If you click on the winter weather tab, that's where you would get the winter forecast, and this weather hazard briefing, that's where our briefings are put. You might say, well, what is a briefing? It's an update we provide to the community when the weather's really bad. Think Hurricane Florence, major severe weather, snow, ice, flooding. So if you go to the website today it's not there. We don't expect any crazy weather, at least for the next couple of days. But prior to last February 2020, we got a little bit of snow. Here's a timing map that we had on the website. And the last real good one for everyone was January 2018. We had back-to-back snows. This is a slide from that briefing. It's a PDF file. Really, really good stuff prior to inclement weather for our area. As far as social media goes, we are on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube. I mentioned this recording will be put there. And we're also a test office for Instagram. Easiest way to find us is just search NWS Morehead City. For those social media channels, we usually take whatever the big story is. Most impactful weather, what's around the corner, what should you be concerned about, and we put that on social media. So we really like that as a way to communicate to the public. Before we talk about the spotter program, out front, I want to put a new index that we're doing in the Weather Service. It's been many, many years in the making. It's taken into a lot of science with regards to trees, urban areas. A lot of GIS and a lot of computer skills and men and women have contributed to this index. So I want to share it with you. Short, it's called WSSI, the Winter Storm Severity Index. And it's a way to categorize weather impacts from winter weather either into one graphic or show you different components. Things like snow amount, how heavy the snow is, the load, blowing snow, or even ice accumulation. And you might say, well, Eric, if I show you a snow map with 6 inches, I know the impact's going to be big here in eastern North Carolina. Where the WSSI helps is, what about a 1/4 inch of ice? What about those areas that are not going to see heavy snow, but maybe they see an ice storm? What about snow that's going to be really heavy, that's going to cause power outages? How are you going to distinguish that on a map versus just showing high snowfall amounts? And I like to back things up with graphics. So we'll take this piece by piece, and then I'll show you the final picture. So I want you to focus on the graphic on the lower left. And this is an example from the Northeast part of the United States a couple years ago. This is snow amount on the bottom left. And you can see the scale. I know it's a little harder to see, but you get the general gist that red is bad and increasing severity, yellow, orange, red, and even purple. So on this map, the most severe impact from snow amount, high snowfall totals, is up toward eastern New York, southern Vermont, western New Hampshire. This middle map is the snow load. Notice that red area has shifted. It's not in New York anymore. Now it's central Massachusetts, southern New Hampshire, that area right along the border. That is from heavy wet snow causing power outages. The third map I want to show you is ice accumulation. Yet again, the red area indicating major impacts is now down towards central Rhode Island, parts of Massachusetts and eastern Connecticut. 3 different variables. If I just showed you a snow map, it would highlight these areas toward New York State, but we're showing you snow amount, heavy wet snow, possible power outages, and ice. So the WSSI allows us to break those impacts up or combine them onto one map, and that's what the map is on the upper right. And here's our 3 red areas. Snow amount, lots of snow toward New York, wet snow in Massachusetts, and perhaps an ice storm, eastern Connecticut, northern Rhode Island, and far eastern Massachusetts. So pretty neat stuff. It's been something that has been worked through the last couple years. We're always looking for feedback on it. You can provide us that feedback by going to the website listed. Again, I'm going to give you this website, so jot it down if you want, but I'll give it to you. And it is in your PDF in the handout section. A pretty neat tool. You may see this in some of our briefings. You can also download this into Google Earth and customize it for your local area. Don't have anything on the horizon yet, but if we do get some snow this winter, we may use it. So wanted you to be aware of it. All right. So the Skywarn program, if this is your first time, it's a volunteer program with the Weather Service to provide ground truth reports of what's happening. Ground truth just means what is happening at your house. Is it snowing, sleeting? Are you seeing freezing rain? These are some of the examples that, yes, if you're new to the area, we do get snow here. Usually snowflakes pretty much every year. We've already seen some flurries up toward Nags Head and Greenville. No measurable snow yet, but pretty much every year we see some snow and some sort of accumulation. Big snows are certainly more rare, but they can happen. Spotters really help us, assist us in the Weather Service with the decision process, provide credibility to a warning. So, if any of that information we can insert into a warning, let's say we have a winter storm warning out, we're already predicting snow, already predicting ice. You send us a report that it's happening, we can insert that into the warning. People are more likely to believe it, and hopefully that helps fulfill our mission of protecting people. Staying off the road, staying home, that type of thing. So Skywarn spotters certainly help us, really know what's going on across our community. One technical slide I want to show you is the radar. It's one tool, a powerful tool, but one tool that we use for our decision process. We've got satellite, we have spotters, we have weather stations, but the radar does have some limitations. And one of those is the Earth is curved, and our beam of radiation from the radar is at an angle. If you live in Newport, you don't want that radar shooting you with radiation. So it's angled up toward the sky. And because the Earth is curved, the farther and farther away that beam gets above the horizon, it actually gets higher into the sky because the Earth is curved. Here's the example on the right. So here's our radar. And again, it's pointed at 0.5 degrees above the surface of the Earth. It can tilt up, it can tilt back down, but never lower than 0.5. So it's angled or arced up. So if you have some clouds or storms, or in this case, snow clouds, really, really close to the radar, the lowest beam and the highest beam, the whole thing can see it. We can see it really, really well. If you're farther away though, again, that beam is getting higher and higher into the sky because the Earth is curved, you may not see all of the snowflakes. A typical severe thunderstorm in the summer, 30, 40, 60,000 feet tall, not as big of a deal. Shallow snow, bay effect snow that we get off the Chesapeake Bay sometimes, flurries, real light precipitation sometimes can be hard to see. So we're just emphasizing that the radar is great. We still have other things we can use, but it does have a limitation. So just a re-emphasis that we certainly need your reports. We do have weather stations, as I mentioned. All of these are airports and airport codes in our community. So if you've ever flown, PGV is Greenville, ISO is Kinston, and so on. So these are all representing areas where we have weather stations 24/7, but only 2 measure snow, New Bern and Hatteras. We have spotters that live close enough that back up the weather station and provide us with real reports. So all of those weather stations, the majority of those do not give us snowfall. Contrast that with this map that I'm about to show you. This is our most recent map of trained spotters. Not all the spotters, just our most recent map. Huge difference. All of you can measure snowfall. Are there gaps? Yeah. Martin County, Terrell County, mainland Hyde and Dare in Beaufort. It's a more rural area. We're not going to have a million spotters, but please help us spread the word. If you know of a young person that wants to get involved in a career in meteorology, somebody that's retired, that's already measuring the weather, somebody that's a farmer, really needs to know about the weather, is already in tune with it, let them know about our program, because we're always looking for new spotters, because we have folks that are moving in and out of the area all the time. So we need to keep people involved in the program. We would certainly appreciate that. So here's a winter outlook. I kind of laugh and smirk as I say this because we're almost, more than halfway through winter, but it's still, a decent forecast in terms of how things are shaping up. And one thing that we, I say we in the Weather Service, but the Climate Prediction Center does these forecasts. Long range forecasts are difficult. Big patterns like La Nina is what we're looking at for this winter, and El Nino and things like that can tip the scales one way or another. But week to week, little changes can make a big difference. So that's why climate forecasts are not only tough, but sometimes they don't tell the whole story. And this is what I mean. This shows that we have a slightly better than average chance of above normal temperatures this winter. That's December through February. If these colors are much darker, that means the probability is higher. But it doesn't mean that we can't have near normal or below normal. It's just the scales are slightly tipped toward above normal temperatures. With that said, even if the forecast is right, and let's face it, we've had some mild days and we've had some cold days, doesn't mean you won't have cold snaps. We've already been in the 20s a couple mornings. Doesn't mean we won't get a big snowstorm. It's just kind of an average what we think will be like for the rest of the winter. And along those lines, slightly better chance of drier than normal. And we have had some pretty good periods of dry weather thus far. So when we're talking Skywarn, we like to talk about hazards in the winter. We're talking snow and ice, of course, but also cold outbreaks, wind and coastal flooding. With our proximity to the ocean, some of our worst flooding, certainly outside of hurricanes, comes from wintertime nor'easters. Want to throw some preparedness tips towards you. This is also on our winter website locally. For home, a good idea to make sure you have food, water, and medicine for 3 to 5 days. You might say, Eric, we don't get a lot of snow here. Do I really need that? You probably already have that. If you live, especially toward the coast, this should be your hurricane kit. So this is a good time to just restock it, check it off. If it's, getting close to expired, eat it up, replenish it, and then you have it for next summer and fall. So you should already have this. If you don't, I really suggest that you work on this. We saw it with Florence. We could see the same thing with an ice storm or a winter storm, where it may be hard to get out for a couple days. So if you just have a couple days of food, water, and medicine, you'll be in real good shape to stay home, and you'll be perfectly fine. Heating system is another concern, especially if we have ice storms and power outages. So just make sure it's tuned up, it's in good working order, would be the thing with that. The one that I want to stress probably the most, and not to negate your home, because again, you should kind of already be in a prep type of atmosphere given our proximity to hurricanes, is on the road, especially if you do some traveling to Western North Carolina. I know some folks go up to Snowshoe in West Virginia, over to Tennessee. If you do any traveling, making sure that your car is in good order is a good idea. Do you need to run out and get snow tires? Of course not. We don't have enough snow down here, but are the tires good? They're not bald? You have windshield wiper fluid. Your battery is good. It's not getting old, those types of things. And knowing the forecast is really at the top of this list, because if you have some flexibility, sometimes you can plan around your trip. If you can leave a day early, stay a day later, having that flexibility, sometimes you can actually avoid the storm, winter storm altogether. The last one is dressing. I just get a kick out of this because I'm always trying to get my kids to wear appropriate clothes outside, not shorts and a t-shirt when it's 45 out. But in reality, we're usually at this end. We're chilly, extra jacket, maybe a flannel shirt, you're good to go. Occasionally, we do get cold. We have had some mornings in the 20s, so a hat and gloves is not bad. And occasionally, even more rare, we can have extreme cold. We usually get some teens, 20s, lower 20s every year, but occasionally we can get into the single digits. The big thing with that, hat, gloves, think your extremities, thicker socks, fingertips, toes, those are the things that get cold first. And then just an extra layer. If you've got your normal winter jacket, you'd be shocked by just throwing an extra sweater on or extra layer, how much that certainly helps. All right, so now we're going to talk about winter storms. If you have attended our spring classes, we talk about moisture, instability, and lift for thunderstorms. In the wintertime, it's close to those ingredients, but we have to throw in cold air. If you're talking snow or ice, you certainly want that. And Mother Nature, not to be too simplistic, but it really follows a recipe. You have to have these ingredients to have a storm. It's as simple as that. If I go to make brownies downstairs tonight and I don't have eggs, not going to work out. Or if I try to make it work out, it's just not going to work out very well. So same thing with winter storms. Our one ingredient that we're usually missing is cold air. It's just not cold enough. We're a little too far south, but more toward the ocean is what keeps us a lot of times from seeing winter weather. The Gulf Stream is still in the 60s to near 70s, so we're not far from a source of warm air. So it's difficult to have the right setup here in Eastern North Carolina. If we have it, usually we have some type of big blue H to our north. That's an area of high pressure. The winds go clockwise around an area of high pressure. That pulls in air from a northerly direction. So any of our snowstorms, we usually have an area of high pressure to our north. The second ingredient, if you want snow or ice, it's got to be precipitating. So you need moisture, you need clouds, water droplets, snowflakes. Usually not at a loss for this. We live near the ocean. To our south is the Gulf of Mexico, so we won't spend a lot of time on that because we usually have that ingredient. The last ingredient, let's say you have all this cold air, all this moisture in place, you need something to trigger it, an acting agent to make it happen. The big one that we're going to go over are cold fronts and warm fronts in areas of low pressure, nor'easters. That's usually where we get our snow. Low pressure systems, cold fronts, stuff like that. I do want to mention two other neat features that don't directly impact us. One is mountains. If you've ever been to Boone or Blowing Rock or toward Roan Mountain, Tennessee, they get a lot of snow. Compare that to Hickory, Winston-Salem, Statesville, those areas. not as much snow. And a lot of it has to do with the mountains. On the windward side of the mountain, as the air collides, the wind is usually from the west or northwest, it's forced to rise. Rising air cools, condenses, forms clouds, and sometimes precipitation. So they get a tremendous amount more of precipitation from roughly where the peak is of the mountains to the west, over toward the Tennessee line. On the opposite side of the mountain, the moisture doesn't just go poof and disappear, but as the air descends out of the mountains, it compresses, it dries out, and it warms up, the exact opposite of the other side. So as it's drying and warming, that precipitation is going away or changing over to rain because it's warming up. So that's why the folks east of the mountains don't see as much. Lake effect snow is the other kind of neat one. It's my favorite type of weather. I think it's awesome. I love snow. We don't get pure lake effect snow here, but we do get the same process off of the Chesapeake Bay. If we get a cold northwest wind going down the length of the Chesapeake Bay, we can and have had flurries in the Outer Banks, occasionally a light dusting. It usually doesn't amount to too much, but almost every year we have some lake effect or bay effect clouds. And all that is very, very cold air crossing a relatively warm body of water. That warm water heats the air above it. It kind of modifies it. And again, warm air rises, cools, condenses, and forms clouds. If that process is very severe, meaning that we're really, really cold and the lake water is really, really warm, it can happen pretty efficiently. And then downwind of the water, if it happens enough, you get precipitation, usually in the form of snow, but it can be lake effect rain in the beginning of the year. We mentioned fronts. These are two big drivers in our weather. A cold front, blue line, blue triangles. Cold air is dense, so it pushes its way in and it really lifts up the clouds. This is what provides the strongest lift for severe thunderstorms in the summertime, but it can provide a source of cold air for our storms. The warm front, exact opposite, warm air is coming in, but notice in this diagram, all the cold air is blue. And again, cold air is dense. It doesn't want to budge. It just sits there. So when warm air comes in, it gradually rides up over the surface. So those clouds tend to be more shallow and flat, but it can produce some snowfall. The one I want to focus on and give you some examples are nor'easters. It's a strong area of low pressure, often forms along the eastern coast, moves off to the northeast. Very, very common to get a few of these a winter. And it's all about the track. Area of low pressure, the winds flow counterclockwise around it. So roughly speaking, if you kind of divided the storm in half or the track, to the right of the track, the winds tend to be more southerly, southeasterly, and you tend to be warmer. To the left of the track, you tend to be colder. It has a more northerly component to the wind. So it's all about the storm track. And that's just not a North Carolina thing. That's a Baltimore, Boston, Raleigh type of thing. Detroit, Michigan. Wherever the storm track is, on the northwest side to the left of the storm is the cold side. To the right of the storm tends to be warmer. And in our case, we have a big warm ocean. So we really, really want this storm track to be out to sea. We want to be to the left of the storm track. And it's very, very tricky for our area. It's really threading the needle. You want it far enough off the coast so that you're cold, you're on the cold side, but you don't want it too far out to sea. You won't see any precipitation. Traditionally, our storms track right along the coast. So we're either on the warm side or too close to it. And folks toward Raleigh or the mountains or Richmond or DC tend to have better chances for snow. So I like to back things up with pictures. This is one of our more recent pretty good storms. This is early January 2018. Here's our area of low pressure. Notice it's not by Myrtle Beach or Charleston or Cape Hatteras. It's a good 100 or 50, 75 miles off the coast. Here's that blue H I was talking about. So again, funneling in cold air. So close enough to us, but a track offshore. So that keeps us on the cold side. This is a radar image from midnight showing some of that heavier snow. It started off as a wintry mix and went to mostly snow. We had as much as 7 inches inland. Pretty much everybody saw an inch or two. I live along the coast in Carteret County, so we saw, I think, just about 2 inches. but pretty decent snow. And I think the thing you might remember more, if you're new to the area, this is something to put in the back of your mind of what can happen. And if you're from the area, you remember this, and I'm sure you remember the cold. I will not forget it. I had moved from upstate New York, lake effect snow, 10, 15 mornings a year below zero, natural gas heat. Here, heat pump, not as warm, not even close. So I was pretty cold these mornings. We were in the single digits to teens by the coast. The water modifies us. It does keep us warmer. So if you live by a body of water, often you're not as cold. But just inland, even a couple miles inland, we were talking temperatures below zero. It was so cold. Whenever it snowed that Wednesday night and the Thursday, I think it was, if it didn't get melted by the sun or chopped up by the people driving, it stayed for days in the shady spots, especially on main roads, Highway 24 in Carteret County, places like that. So it was impressive. And we saw some ice on the local sounds. These are some pictures. So we saw snow, but easily the most impressive thing about this was the cold. This is a satellite image. Everything white on this map is snow. You can see some of the agricultural areas showing up darker. Hyde, Beaufort County. That's pretty neat stuff. But eastern part of the Pamlico Sound, Albemarle Sound, again, any of the local creeks, shallow bodies of water, especially like the Pamlico, saw ice on it. It's certainly not cold enough to drive on, but it was pretty impressive for our part of the state. A couple weeks later, deja vu again. Pretty big differences with this one. This is a more typical southern snow, but again, notice low pressures off the coast. You don't see the H on this map, but it's actually just on the edge. It's just to our west. So clockwise flow around it. Our winds were from northeast. And we did get some snow, and some of us saw more snow out of this, but generally speaking, this was less snow. Again, along the coast, we saw a light dusting, even almost less than that inland. But if you're watching us tonight from the northern Outer Banks, Manio, Mans Harbor, Kill Devil Hills, you folks saw 7 to 10 inches. But for most of us, it was a typical southern snow. It snowed in the morning or ended in the morning. By afternoon, it was completely gone and melted away. And it was not as cold after. So that first part of January 2018 is probably the one you really remember. We'll briefly go over some more historic storms. I'm hoping we get one of these. Don't shoot the messenger, but hopefully we get one of these years so we can enjoy it. 15 to 20 inches, Christmas '89. We say Christmas '89. It happened a couple days before, but when you're talking about that much snow, it certainly was a white Christmas that year. This is Carteret County. Also some pictures from Carteret County. Looks like it could be Michigan, New York, Pennsylvania, but nope, this is Eastern North Carolina in Christmas 1989. So that's a pretty historic storm for our area as well, down toward the Wilmington, North Carolina area. Our biggest storm that I could find on record was the March 1980. It's been a long day. 1980 storm, 20 to 30 inches across our area, especially the western part of Carteret, up toward the Havelock area. And I'm not sure if this means they didn't see snow in the Outer Banks, but it looks like there may have been a sharp cutoff. But a foot plus for most of us, and when you're talking more than 2 feet of snow anywhere in the United States, that's a good snow. And then you combine it with it's rare to get that much here. I'm sure that was a one that if you're from the area, and comment in the chat. I know we got quite a few people on there. If you're from the area, if you remember any of these, I'd just like to hear from you. We can bring that up at the end. But March 1980, this is Beaufort, some of the pictures of the snow. So we talked a lot about snow, gets the most notoriety, nor'easters, but there are other factors in the winter that can impact us, and that's with regards to ice. This is a beautiful image showing how ice can form. It actually has to do with upstairs in the atmosphere being above freezing. It has not as much to do with what's going on where we are. And I'll talk about that in a second. With snow, it starts as a raindrop or snowflake, way up in the clouds. But for all intents and purposes, we'll say below freezing all the way down, it remains a snowflake. If it's really, really, really deep cold air and the surface is just real thin with a little bit of warm air, you can have snowflakes up to 40 degrees. But for the most part, you want to be near or below freezing. The way sleet works, think back to, I mentioned warm air is lighter than cold air. So if warm air is trying to come in and we're 30 degrees, 28 degrees, we're not going to warm up right away. The first thing that's going to happen is it's going to warm up in the clouds up above us first. So that's what's represented by this pink area. This area is above freezing. So the snowflake falls, it melts into a raindrop, but there's still a lot of cold air prior to it hitting the ground. So it freezes into an ice pellet. That's that clinging you hear on your windows or your cars bouncing around. That's sleet. That is different than hail. Hail only happens with thunderstorms. So for the most part, I know we can get some thunderstorms in the wintertime, so you can never say never, but for the most part, hail is spring, summer, early fall. It's thunderstorms. Water drop goes up in the cloud because of an updraft, falls because of gravity, back up in the cloud, up and down, up and down. That's a hailstone. A sleet is just a one-way process. It's a raindrop that freezes, then hits the ground. So that's a big difference. Sometimes people will report hail in the winter. And again, if it's with a thunderstorm, maybe. But for the most part, if it's cold out, you're talking sleet in the winter. The next type of precipitation is freezing rain. Notice our pink area is wider. So it melts into a raindrop, but it does not have a chance to refreeze into an ice pellet. Instead, it hits a cold surface, your car, the power lines, trees, your sidewalk, freezes on contact. Probably the most dangerous winter weather because you can't drive in it. It can certainly cause issues with power outages. And then rain, much more simpler. It's a snowflake, raindrop, but the whole way down is warm enough that it stays all liquid. So we alluded to this with ice storms. It can cling to everything, cause communication, power outages. You can see from the pictures, can be a real issue. We're lucky that we don't tend to see a lot of ice storms, especially toward the coast. Would be more likely inland, especially even toward Raleigh or even especially toward Hickory, Greensboro. In terms of frequency, it's more frequent the farther west you go into the foothills of the mountains, but it can happen here. One thing I want to call your attention to a little more is coastal storms. And you might say, Eric, wintertime is snow and ice, and it is, but think about those nor'easters I talked about. An area of low pressure is a strong storm system, and if they usually track near us, especially if we're not seeing snow, they can bring other things like heavy rain, wind, thunderstorms, even the threat for tornadoes. This is March 2018, and what a crazy year that was. I mean, again, we had the snow and ice, we had this, and of course we had Florence. Just a real wild year. This storm brought almost tropical, strong tropical storm force winds, 64 miles per hour, Cedar Island. This is a picture of some of the flooding up in Avon. Often, depending on our winds, they'll push all the water one way in the sounds. So we had flooding on the Outer Banks, but then we also had low water. This is an image of the Pamlico River in Washington, showing the boats, issues with them. And then this is a gauge showing how below normal the water was. Very, very impressive. I see we got a chat from Aaron. I appreciate this. I see he mentioned for one of these past storms, at least a foot in Manio, south end of the house, the drift was high enough. And Aaron was a younger person at the time. And Aaron, what storm was that? He was talking about at least a foot in Manio. It might be the 1980 storm, or it could be Christmas. So I appreciate those comments. I really like when we have folks from the community that have been here for a while and can share their expertise with what happened. 1980, very, very good. So, up in Manio, at least a foot and heavy drifting. So, I mean, I'm sure Aaron remembers that being a younger person, like he said with those comments. Very, very, historic storm across eastern North Carolina. Back to the coastal storm, 2018, later in the year, almost hurricane force gust on Ocracoke. There's some flooding. So we just want to point that out. We're going to get to what to report to us here in a section, but if you do live in a coastal area, keep in mind any of those issues of flooding or high water we want to know about. even though it's not snow and ice, we do want to address that in this class. So letting us know that information is good. So we're about 7:11. We're right on time, about 10, maybe 15 minutes tops. We're going to go through snowfall reporting, and then it's over to you for any questions. We try to keep these as concise as possible because we know you all have lots of stuff going on. So this last part of the class is going to talk about how to measure snow, where to measure snow, all about observations. And you may say, wow, that's a lot of information on snow. It's a more difficult observation. You may have a weather station, even a digital rain gauge, and you can read that from the comfort of your home. With snowfall reports, you got to go outside. You've got to take a couple measurements, put on the jacket, because it should be cold out if it's snowing. And these reports are used by many people beyond the Weather Service. So we're really appreciative of them, and we want to make sure they're as accurate as possible. And that starts with selecting a good spot tonight, tomorrow, the next day. Think about your yard. Where would be a good spot to be? You want to be away from tall objects like trees, your house, the roadway, but you don't want to be in a spot that drifts a lot. And again, Aaron is up toward the Outer Banks. Some places are just going to be drifty, but just do the best you can, and know that not all sites are going to be perfect. So this is an image of what would be perfect. Again, we're not all going to have a backyard like this. Open, away from tall trees, but in the distance, you do have some trees for the blockage of the wind. We show you ideal. You try to get to that as close as possible. If you're on the Outer Banks and it's always windy during these storms, do the best you can. If you're in an urban area with tall buildings, do the best you can to get away from them. If you live in a suburban lot and you've got some trees, but the middle of your yard is away from all those trees, that's what we're aiming for. So just want to give you some things to think about when you're talking about where you want to measure snow. And I love showing pictures. This gentleman is measuring under a tree. No big deal, right? He's measured 3 inches of snow, and what's the problem? He took a couple steps to the middle of his yard, a typical suburban lot. We're not talking acreage, 6.5 inches of snow. So do not measure near trees or especially under them. So if you live in a spot with a lot of trees and you say, Eric, what am I going to do? Just try to get out from under the trees themselves, because it certainly makes a big, big difference. What can you use to measure? Pretty easy. Most of us have rulers or tape measures. I'm ambitious, so hopefully one of these days we'll use a yardstick if we get another 1980 storm. We do want you to measure to the nearest 1/10 of an inch. We just want precision. Don't round it, to the whole number and things like that. So 6.4, 6 1/4, and you can round that up to 6.3, stuff like that. Just as important to getting to the nearest 1/10, take an average. So stick your ruler in the ground a couple times. You just want a good representation of the area. This is especially important for you folks with drifts. If you have, lots of drifts in the yard, try not to measure here. Try to measure where it's more uniform, or just try to take the average. Because I've been there, done that, where there's just drifts all over the place. Just measure a lot, average it out, and then when you call us, which we'll talk about, just let us know that, hey, it's been crazy drifting up here. This is the best I could do. Where can you measure? Well, just going out into the yard, measuring in the grass is more than fine. That's all you need to do. If you want to go the extra mile, you can make a snowboard. And what a snowboard is just a flat, solid object, in this case plywood, 2x2, that when you go down into the snow and you hit that board, you know that's 0. Because when you're measuring snow in the grass, you're going down into the blades a little bit. Not a lot, but you are. I like to measure on my deck. The deck is a great, solid place, right? But it's attached to my house. So the first thing I do is I'll take a couple measurements on the deck, and then I walk out to the snowboard, which is in the middle of the yard, and I'll just compare just to see. If it's a pretty calm storm, not a lot of wind, the measurements are going to be pretty close. But if you have a lot of wind, that's where you can have some difference. So a snowboard is just a flat piece of wood put in the most ideal spot of your yard. Do you have to have one? No. Can you measure in the grass with a school ruler? Yes. But if you want to make a snowboard, that's how you would do it. 2x2 of plywood, paint it white so that it reflects the sunlight. Since it's white, and last time I checked, since snow is also white, you want to mark it. I never did this in New York until a couple storms in, so I was always out in my yard poking around. I usually measured in about the same spot, so it wasn't a huge deal, but certainly get some reflectors up to mark it out. How often should I measure? At least once at the end of the storm. So it snows, it stops, you measure a couple times, take an average to the nearest tenth, call us up. If you want to report during the storm itself, you don't need to call us every hour, and I need to change this on here. I've got every 3. Every 6 is the most you should call us. It gives it time to settle or melt to do what it's going to do. So at least at the end of the storm, if you're home and you want to report more often, no more often than every 6 hours. Here's an example. The snow starts Monday morning at 9. At 1 o'clock, it's 2.4 inches of snow. The sun comes out, it melts, it settles, and by the next day, it's 1.2. The whole idea of this graphic is we want you to measure as close to 1 o'clock in this scenario as possible. We know we have school and work and we have stuff going on, so just measure as soon as you can after it stops, because you've lived around here. If you have any amount of time, you know sometimes it doesn't last long, so you better get out there and measure it before it's all gone. So we talked about the radar, the Skywarn program, the winter outlook, all good stuff. Please remember this slide. Program it into your phone, put it on your refrigerator, however you want to do it. But our 800 number is the way we want you to report to us. We're going to show you the email and social media and amateur radio. All good stuff to supplement information, but the phone call is best because we always answer our phones. Social media, we're active, but we don't always get that information right away. We want you to get in the habit of this because when it comes to severe weather like a tornado, we want you to know right away how to call, and the most urgent way is certainly our 800 number. We would like you to kind of follow a procedure so that you just get the information out. Again, for snow, you might say, well, Eric, is it really necessary? This is just training you for down the road so that if you call severe weather where we need to know right away so we can continue the warning, issue a warning, update the warning, and it's seconds and minutes matter in the spring and summer. So call us up in the winter, who you are, I'm a trained spotter, where you live, how much snow you have, and the time of observation. All of that is important, especially if you call, let's say, well after the snow has stopped, but you had to go to school or work. Just tell us that. Hey, I measured late in the day. This is what my observation has been. And that's where we can talk to you. If you have some drifting or some trouble or some questions, we can talk to you versus an online type of format. So to summarize, find a good level place, where there's no drifting or melting like in a driveway. Slide the snow ruler into the snow. Take an average. We're most concerned just one measurement at the end. That's it. Nearest tenth of an inch, and then that will do it. Other ways to make reports, and I like to call this supplemental follow-up. Our email, you got some videos, some pictures, any of that type of stuff, send us an email, weatherobs, wxobs.mhx@noaa.gov. Another good time to mention, you're going to get all these links, you're going to get the 800 number, all of this, in my follow-up tomorrow. So, kind of look at it, but I'll follow up with you. We mentioned when to report, by the end of the storm, but other things that you can tell us about, if it's snowing really heavy. So the example would be, hey, it's really snowing up in Greenville. It hasn't stopped. Mr. Eric said wait until the end to give us a final report. But if it's snowing crazy or really bad out or icy, call us and just let us know. Hey, I'm a train spotter from Pitt County. I live in Winterville. It hasn't stopped yet. Haven't even measured it, but I just want to let you know that it's really coming down hard. That's good information to know. For ice accumulation, any amount of ice that you get, let us know about it. Not as concerned with the exact measurements. It can be a safety issue for sure. So if you just tell us we've got freezing rain, the road it's sticking to the roads or my car or the trees, that's good information. If you do want to venture outside and measure it, there's a couple different ways to do it. Certainly let us know which way you do, because it can vary. One of the ways is flat ice. I haven't really done this. This would be like on the top of a pole or a surface, and you just measure the actual, on thickness of the ice. So this is called flat ice. The way that I'm more familiar with is radial ice, and that's just accumulating to your crepe myrtle, your small trees, and that's where you measure the ice itself and subtract out the tree branch or the limb, whatever it's accumulating on. So in this case, it's 5/16 of an inch of ice, because there's 3/16 on the right, 7/16 on the left, and when you take out the branch, that's 5/16, and that's about 3/10 of an inch of ice. So hopefully, again, ice measurement, it can be useful for documentation for us, but from my perspective, I'd rather know it's just actually happening than you futzing around in the middle of an ice storm. Another way to report is online. If you don't want to call us for whatever reason, we don't bite. We're good people. On our website, if you scroll to the bottom, there's a Google form, and it reminds me I've got to update this. It's working, but there's a few things I want to tweak to it, including to identify who you are, if you're a trained spotter or not. But you simply go through the form and you can input that information. We get it right away. It comes to our email, but we have to answer the phone. So that's why we stress the 800 number. Email, social media, those are other things that can be distractions sometimes, and we're in the middle of something. But if that phone is ringing and it's that 800 number is only for spotters, we're answering it. So that's why we prefer that number. What else should you report? Tornadoes, hail, wind damage. We cover that in future classes. I will talk about that in a second. Our goal is to make you a year-round spotter, to get you in this habit of snow, rain reporting. So if you do get a bad storm, that you can call us instantly and you know what to report. Flooding, we want to know from you folks on the Outer Banks if you live by the sounds or the ocean. For that, it's just knowing about it. And if you've been a local and you've been in the area, maybe you have a gauge on the waterway, or you could just tell us, hey, look, it floods like this all the time, but just want to let you know that there's water in Collington again. Or, hey, it hasn't been this high since this storm or this event. That's useful information. So please let us know. Social media, I mentioned, we're on NWS Morehead City. You can search us. Very similar to the email, this would be a good spot to follow up with pictures or video. If you are doing a report, email, social media, online, just identify yourself as a spotter so we can elevate your report in terms of accuracy. CocoRaws is a program I want to talk about. This is an online reporting way. This is more every day. Between 7 and 9, you report precipitation. It's a great program if you're really into the weather. You're going to want to buy a rain gauge, a non-digital one, and they'll explain in the training why those are more accurate. But all of the information is on the website, from joining to the training, which you're going to recognize because I heavily borrowed the snow measurement from CocoRaws because it's great, where to get your rain gauge, all kinds of stuff. And I don't want to scare you off by saying every day. It doesn't mean if you miss a day, the CocoRaws police are going to come and get you. But with the app on your phone or logging into the website, if you save it on your PC, very, very easy. 30 seconds, 1 minute each day. If it hasn't rained like it hasn't here for a couple days, it's 0, and it takes 10 seconds to enter. But if it rains or snows, you report it through the website. And this is a program that's utilized heavily. And it counts for records. It's really, really, really good program. At this point, I should also mention, we do get the CocoRaws reports in the office. So you don't necessarily have to call in your snowfall if you're a CocoRaws member. The only thing I would say, maybe still update us, is if it's fall, ends in the evening, because CocoRaws is like 7 a.m. to 7 a.m. the next day, like roughly, early morning to early morning the next day. Let's say the snow ends by evening. You're not going to make the report to us until the next morning, which is fine. Still do that. but maybe call us and give us a heads up so we get that information sooner than 12 hours later, if that makes sense. MPing is a cool app you can download, or if you have Radar Scope or various weather apps. I don't promote any single one, but there are a lot of radar apps out there that you might be familiar with. It has MPing on it. It's a great way to report precipitation. Is it snowing, hailing, sleeting at my house? A pretty neat program you can get involved in. Doesn't, no commitment or cost. You just do it when it's precipitating. All right, in summary, please call the 800 number. These are the other ways you can keep in touch with us. That's how I would call these other ways. Keep in touch, let us know what's going on, follow up, but final reports, urgent reports, questions, with regards to your report, please call the 800 number. We're just about done with the class. I do want to mention our future classes for those that are new. This is a sister class to our spring one, which is our next class. It'll be in March, April, and May. In the beginning, same principles, but we go into tornadoes, high winds, hail. Flood and tropical, we do those in the summer, and in an advanced class goes into radar signatures, dual pole, hook echoes, kind of a weather 101, and kind of our gift to you. If you've been through, at least one of these, we want to show you some more science now that you know how to report. All of this is on our website, which you're going to get. All of this is on YouTube. If you are not tired of hearing my voice, because unfortunately, if you are, I do most of the training. It's all on YouTube. So the advanced one on there now. Cocoa Raws on there now. Basic Skywarn on there now. And some of them I've broken up into parts so you can kind of take them at your leisure. So this is my contact information. My email is probably the best way to get a hold of me. You'll hear from me tomorrow. If you don't hear from me, you got a question, any clarification, just shoot me an email at any point. I mentioned we work 24/7, so email's the best way. If it's holidays or active weather, may be delayed a little bit, but I'm usually pretty quick at the response. Email, website, and all the follow-up information will be sent in your email tomorrow. All right, at this point, it is all yours. So you are done the class. If you need to log out, put the kids to bed, finish dinner, whatever you need to do, that's fine. For those that are still on, I'll take any questions that you have. If you have any questions, go ahead and ask it in the chat. If you want to ask a verbal question, just raise your hand. I'll call on you. So if you did it by accident, you'll have a chance to undo it. No big deal. And let's see here if we got any questions.